voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, we had Ronna McDaniel on, Donna, earlier on the program, chairwoman of the RNC, and she was talking about the possibility of a brokered convention, the impact that would have on Bernie Sanders. Here's Ronna.
It does depend on how big the lead that Sanders takes out of California is, if he picks up a huge proportion of delegates. But I don't see anybody getting out soon, and it's leading towards potentially a broker convention, which will be rigged against Bernie if those superdelegates have their way on that second vote.
To that, you say what, Donna?
First of all, I want to talk to my Republicans. First of all, stay the hell out of our race. Stay the hell out of our race. I get sick and tired, Ed, and Sandra, of listening to Republicans tell me and the Democrats about our process. First of all, they don't have a process. They're canceling primaries. They have winner take all. They don't have the kind of democracy that we see on the Democratic side. And for people to use Russian talking points to sow division among Americans, that is stupid. So, Ronna, go to hell. This is not about, go to hell. I'm tired of it, Ed. We're not trying to prevent anyone from becoming the nominee. If you have the delegates and win, you will win. This notion that somehow or another Democrats are out there trying to put hurdles or roadblocks before one candidate, that's stupid. I know what's going on. They are scared of Democrats coming together to defeat Donald Trump. They need to be focusing on what we're focusing on, the Democratic Party, and that is preventing foreign interference in our elections. Stop using Russian talking points, Madam Chairwoman. Period.
All right.
Stop using it. It
Donna,
pisses
with
me.
all due respect, we had her on to talk about what she sees happening here in the same way that we asked you to.
But Sandra, she's not a Democrat. I'm a Democrat, but I'm also an American, and I have a responsibility to make sure that the process, I know the process, Ronna knows the process, but to infer that we're trying to prevent one candidate over another, that's not happening. And if there's any proof, Madam Chairwoman, any proof, Mr. President, that we're trying to somehow or another change this process for one candidate.
Well, let's just take this back to the basic. Let's take this back to the basic thing that we hear from every single Democrat right now, that the goal is to beat Donald Trump. So you have to look at which one of your candidates, as I ask you every time you're on this program, Donna, and which of those candidates do you believe has the best chance of beating Donald Trump? Final thoughts.
Well, if you look at the polls, and especially in those battleground states, there are several who have a path to beat Donald Trump. We know that taking an incumbent president out of the Oval Office is going to be tough. That's tough. But Donald Trump needs to understand that the Democratic Party is a party composed of Americans, regardless of your political beliefs. Some people are leftists, some people are moderates, but we're all American voters. Okay. I get tired of people saying that we're something else.
All right, it's Super Tuesday. We're going to have to bring you and Ronna together at some point. We'll get everybody.
I'm all about reconciliation. You know, it's Lent, so I'm trying to keep my karma.
All right.
But stop lying about the democratic process. That's all I'm asking.
She had her say, you had your say, and we're going to move on. Donna Brazile, we appreciate it.
Amen.
Thank you, Donna.
It is Wednesday, the 4th of March of 2020. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of this meddlesome priest? Well, we had a super Tuesday now, didn't we? The Biden turnaround is one of the, I have to say, overwhelming stories in political history. The velocity in which that turnaround occurred is quite stunning, and it can be attributed, I have to say, to Clyburn's endorsement, which I think beggars the opinion that holding on to that early voting until, I don't know, closer to Election Day might give you a better grasp of the political situation out there and how things change. I wouldn't say that folks who voted early threw their votes away. There were plenty of down-ticket races that are important. We need not put all of our attention at the top. I know some candidates who never have been registered as Democrats running on the Democratic ticket aren't really working hard for those down-ticket races. And I know, and I think you know who I'm speaking about. But if he is to prevail, and I'm not talking about Biden. Biden fights for those down-ticket races, always. Even when he's not running. Regardless, if he does not do anything about down-ticket races, as he has been not doing throughout this election season, how are policies going to be enacted if you have no control over the House, which we could lose, the Senate, which we should win? How do you do that? We have to get rid of Mitch McConnell. We have to have an even more overwhelming majority in the House. Yeah, we need more than 60. All right, let's get clear right now. We need so many more House Democrats sitting that they can override a Trump veto, if he happens to be there. But we need to have an overwhelming majority in the House to stop any interference that you know is going to come from Republicans. I don't even think we can call them Republicans anymore. We need to control the Senate. Moscow Mitch has been packing the courts. And it looks like those courts are just going to decide in Trump's favor. Hell with President, hell with the Constitution. They're from the Federalist Society. They know better. There is an OLC memo somewhere that says any Federalist Society judge has to rule in favor of Donald Trump because he fears it might interfere with his reelection if they don't. In fact, I suppose those Federalist Society judges will rule at one point that anyone running against Donald Trump is a threat to his reelection and therefore are illegal candidates. They are illegals. We're not too far off from that. Not one bit. So we had a Super Tuesday. Lots of people voted, even though in Texas, 7 hours in minority districts to vote. Oh, if you're in a white affluent area, just breezed right through, no problem. 750, 60 polling places closed in the run-up to this primary, not counting the thousands that have been closed in years previous. That is voter suppression. I know. They had to do it because they had to save money. No, you open up polling places when you know there's going to be a high turnout. Unfortunately, since the Voting Rights Act was overturned by John Roberts, that balls and strikes guy, who never calls a foul ball on the home team, and the home team are the Repugs. Let's be clear. Never calls a foul ball on them. Gutted the Voting Rights Act, and immediately voter suppression tactics were put in place because, hey, we don't have any oversight on us now. Let's get back to the good old days of gumball counting and irrational spellings of words we don't even know how to spell ourselves. That's right. How many angels can fit on the head of this pin? You don't have the right answer, you don't vote. Back to those good old days. Speaking of good old days, how about the days before we had any, medicine in which to attack a pandemic? Oh, we do have a medicine. We do have a vaccine. It was developed in 3 days. Who has ever heard of that? Well, Donald Trump ordered it, and it was so. Apparently now, we have a vaccine developed in 3 days that has not gone through any clinical trials. And if it has gone through clinical trials, it's not for COVID-19. It's for some ambiguous flu. A flu vaccine is not a COVID-19 vaccine. Let's be clear. Donald Trump doesn't know anything about science. He wants things done now because he's God on earth. You think I'm kidding? That's what he thinks. And apparently, that's what his Vichy collaborators think as well. We have, out here on the West Coast, and I've been actually hearing this occurring across the country from my friends, my acquaintances, my professional colleagues. Those who still deal in Facebook are seeing another uptick of the same kinds of strategies and tactics that occurred back in 2016. Actually, it started in 2015. That's when I noticed the demarcation point. And some of these are real people. I know at least one guy in town. I don't know him, but I know of him. I think I've seen him. I have dealt with people, some small business owners who got peeved because my dead son's picture was on my Facebook page because I was honoring him when he and my granddaughter and my nieces stood on the steps of the Oregon State Capitol to protest Trump's icebox baby gulag policy while scores of Proud Boys had intended to take those steps. And my son, with a bullhorn and some little girls, kept the Proud Boys at bay. And they called me a little punk because they thought my dead son was me. Well, I would have liked to have been my dead son in that situation. Trust me. The Trump brand is one predicated on hate. It is predicated on fear. It is predicated on ignorance. Put those three together and what do you get? A bunch of brown shirt bullies. Say fuck you to their faces? And oh, you have stepped over a line. Liberals aren't supposed to do that. Liberals are not supposed to make money. Liberals apparently don't have jobs. We're all there as, what was the term? Sucking at daddy's nipple. What the hell is that metaphor? And I got to tell you, the homophobic tropes and the misogynistic tropes and the questioning of your manhood. I'm a grandfather. Do you think I really care about what some nobody loser kid is questioning my manhood like I care? I never cared back in the day when it was supposed to matter. Because it was stupid. You know yourself or you don't. I don't question my manhood. I don't have any question about it. You think you can throw some sort of, snowflake attitude that I'm supposed to adhere to? And what is this BS about not having a job? No liberal can have a job? No liberal can make money? What? This is asinine brainwashing. And if it's not asinine brainwashing, it's, did they even finish a history class in high school? Makes you wonder if they even got to high school. So, the most ignorant, the most hateful, the most fearful, that's the base for Trump. They are small in number, they are loud. And it's okay that we can be vast in numbers and we can be louder back. There is nothing wrong with it. They need to be told that we know that they are there, they are exposed. And they're not going to get away with it. They don't even know who the slumbering giant is. I'll tell you, Hirohito. All right? Hirohito. He warned what would happen, and it did. And when Vietnam was stopped, it wasn't because of some, awakening at the leadership. It was because the slumbering giant, the great middle of America, was roused from their slumber, and they said, no more of that. It is stopped, and it was stopped right now. The slumbering giant has been roused once again, folks. We saw it on Super Tuesday. We have to have the most voluminous voter turnout so that even though you have to wait 7 hours plus in Texas to vote, you will still do it. And let me just say one other thing about that. A 7+ hour wait is a poll tax because people have to take off that day from work and lose their money. And they're only able to do that because balls and strikes robbers gutted the Voting Rights Act. We have to stop that. We need to take over. We then need to have a complete review of our judiciary. The FBI can investigate every confirmation hearing, go over the transcripts, and those who committed perjury will be removed. And if there is true justice in a representative democracy, those who committed perjury in their confirmation process will be jailed in accordance with the law. We don't have to give up our norms because they've been, destroyed. I guess that's the term we have to use. We don't need to put the remnants back together and repurpose it into something else. We can put the pillars of our institutions back together, and those who have violated the law will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and we have to not think that that is something that we cannot do. Oh, it's just not nice to do that. We have to look forward. The only way to look forward is to make sure that whatever was stabbing you in the back doesn't stab you in the back anymore. It's simple. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Hey, Ronna Romney McDaniel, stay the hell out of our elections. Thank you, Donna Brazile. I think Donna Brazile has rehabilitated herself. My, oh my. On the rest of the menu, Trump is such a spoiled rich boy dimwit. He doesn't know the difference between a vocational school and a junior college. Wow. You know, when you get your dad to pay the fee to get your degree at Wharton, I don't think you're really imbued with the complete scholastic result that you were supposed to get when you were supposed to go to class. The Trump campaign sued several news outlets he doesn't like for stating facts that could damage his reelection. You know, Bill Barr does have an OLC memo in hand, ready to present that shows that, oh, indeed, those news outlets have violated the law because they could damage Trump's reelection. That's against the law. And Trump administration appointees now must prove their devotion to Trump or else. Yeah, or else what? We've seen what happens. Your family might be, well, attacked. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Japan is still preparing for the Olympics to open on 24 July as planned. And the mass women's strike in Mexico, planned for 9 March, is like a Cinderella dream come true. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Link, and thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will then hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, that recurring contribution helps us pay our bills and, as I've mentioned before, amass some funds so that we can buy some newish machinery to replace these workhorses that have worked so hard, almost like horses, over all this time, which would be about, actually a little over 4 years now. In this almost 9-year run of Netroots Radio's progressive radio, resistance radio, 24/7, 365 resistance radio, and we've been able to do it because of your generosity. I want to give a big shout out to our newest Patreons. Thank you to you, and you know who you are, who just became a Patreon yesterday with a quite sizable recurring contribution. Thank you. Thank you. And those of you who became Patreons last month, Patreon has put the monies into the account, and now I will send in these cases, and actually some have chosen not to take a benefit, but your bumper sticker and our little ad block, I'm going to send both this time. Usually it's one or the other, but I'll send that ad block and bumper sticker to you in your snail mail address as you provided on our Patreon page so that you could receive that benefit. And thank you to all of you who are recurring Patreons. Thank you to those who are new recurring Patreons. And once again, we thank everybody for their generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, even before the drafting of the Constitution. I'm serious, even before that. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and I have to say, we all do. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, so go ahead and follow me there on Twitter. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media for everybody's social media linkage pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. All right, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oh, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. You know, I got to say, Beckett was one of my favorite movies. I know. You'll just have to say, okay, boomer. But check it out. Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole are quite... the tour de force says that they were as individuals. Do check it out. In fact, I believe that was one of Peter O'Toole's first major leads. So, quite stunning. And, of course, we know Richard Burton. Yeah, he was a Welshman. Oliver Willis brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. From a March 3rd speech to the National Association of Counties Legislative Conference, Trump said, "I love the name vocational school. When I was growing up, we used to use Edison Vocational School, where they train you for, cars and for bricklaying and for plumbing and all the things that there's tremendous talent involved." He's never worked a day in his life. Give me a break. And it was incredible. You don't see that. Now they call them junior colleges. This guy never went to school. His dad bought him degrees. He's never heard of a junior college or a community college. My God. Okay, now they call them junior colleges, and you don't really, as junior colleges, you don't really know what that means. That means he doesn't know what it means. What is a junior college? What does it mean? So we're getting back to the word vocational. I thought it was very important, and it's something that they're very proud of, and I would be very proud also. All right. Donald Trump, a leader in academics, the scholar among scholars, anointed by God to be his emissary on earth. In fact, God is stepping aside so Donald Trump can take over. Emily Singer of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Donald Trump's campaign announced that it filed a libel suit against the Washington Post, accusing the newspaper of publishing false and defamatory statements intended to maliciously interfere with and damage Trump's reelection. You know, this is funny. Government is the only entity that can impinge upon free speech. Donald Trump, as President of the United States, through the arm of his campaign, is using the force of government to stifle free speech from a free press. And we're talking opinion pieces, too. Back to the article. The lawsuit challenges two separate pieces from 2019 by Washington Post opinion writers Greg Sargent and Paul Waldman. Sargent's piece quotes from special counsel Robert Mueller's report about how the Trump campaign welcomed Russia's interference in the 2016 election, which is a factual statement. But William Barr had 4 days to set the narrative on the Mueller report, which was 180 degrees diametrically the opposite of what the Mueller report found. Barr went out in public before the Mueller report was released. And I got to say, the Mueller report is heavily redacted, too. Bill Barr said it was proven that Russia had nothing to do with the 2016 election. Oh, yeah, you know, they're Russia and they're Vlad, but no. Trump has never had any comment or never had any conversation. And yet, we all saw Kislyak and Lavrov in the Oval Office, and the only reason we saw that is because RT broadcast it because our press was prevented from being a party to that little party. Bill Barr lied about the Mueller report. The Trump administration continues to lie about the Mueller report. Trump TV, both OANN and Fox, and I got to say, all of Sinclair Broadcasting as well, have been lying about the Mueller report. And now, the Trump campaign, sneakily, even though we're not the government, we're just the campaign, is suing the free press for libel because it might damage Trump's reelection. I want to know again, can Hillary Clinton sue? Because, you know, she was damaged for decades and decades and decades. I know there's only so many decades in our lifetime, but, you know, I'm making a point. Can she sue? No, she won't be able to because it's Hillary. Waldman's piece pointed to Trump's interview with ABC News, in which Trump said he wouldn't necessarily turn offers of help or turn away offers of help in the 2020 election from foreign countries such as Russia or China. Waldman went on to write, who knows what sort of aid Russia and North Korea will give to the Trump campaign now that he has invited them to offer their assistance, and he's being sued for that. The Trump campaign's lawsuit claims that there has never been any statement by anyone associated with the campaign or the administration inviting Russia or North Korea to assist the campaign in 2019 or beyond. Really now, I think we have the tapes. And I don't know, if you're saying that the President of the United States is not involved in the Trump campaign, I want to know how much gaslighting you think the American people can really stand. And I know you have some Federalist Society judges that you may be able to roll the dice and have hear the case. And I know it might go up through the appellate process. I know the Ninth Circuit has been decimated, and it's pretty much a toady Federalist Society Vichy collaborating appellate court. But you got to roll the dice and hope you can get that now, can't you? The Trump campaign's lawsuit is the second the Trump campaign filed against a news organization that reported facts that Trump does not like. Last week, Trump sued the New York Times for defamation over an opinion piece from Max Frankel that relied on previous reports about a possible quid pro quo between the Trump campaign and Russia in 2016. The lawsuit says that article does not acknowledge that, in fact, there had been extensive reporting, including in the Times, and the meetings and contacts that the defamatory article refers to did not result in any quid pro quo deal between the campaign and Russia. Really? However, Frankel's article came out weeks before the full Mueller report was released to the public. The report found that the Trump campaign did welcome Russian interference, but there was not sufficient evidence to charge the campaign with a conspiracy. And you know why? Because they obstructed Mueller, they threatened Mueller, and they held back the evidence Mueller demanded. That is why they did not have the evidence. They had the evidence. Theodore J. Boutros Jr., a First Amendment lawyer with Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, LLP, wrote in a Washington Post op-ed that the lawsuits are dangerous to freedom of the press, calling the first lawsuit against the New York Times paper-thin and full of embarrassingly shoddy legal work. Boutros points out the Supreme Court precedent set in the New York Times Company versus Sullivan requires a public figure to prove by clear and convincing evidence that the defendant made an allegedly defamatory statement of fact knowing it was false or with reckless disregard for the truth. You know, the kind of defamatory statements that are used as false and in reckless disregard, like Hillary being the head of a pedophile ring in the basement of Comet Pizza. There is no basement at Comet Pizza. That is knowingly making a false statement in reckless disregard for the truth. I know Trump can turn things upside down. I know he can gaslight, but we are not as stupid as the people who voted for him. Trump has long feuded with both the New York Times and the Washington Post, which have broken numerous stories about scandals within the Trump administration, including the collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia in 2016. Trump has tweeted dozens of attacks against the New York Times, saying the outlet is failing, despite the fact that the outlet is seeing growing digital subscriptions and positive revenue. And he often attacks the Washington Post and its reporters as fake news, and has criticized the paper for being owned by billionaire Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, whom Trump dislikes. Well, you know what? We're still looking into the Khashoggi murder, Donnie. You think Joe Biden's son is corrupt? I want to know what Kushner and Jr. had to do with that. I want to know what DeVos's brother Eric Prince had to do with that. And I want to know, Donald Trump, what you had to do with that. And the way we do that is yes, with a free American press. Looks like Emily Singer brings us this last offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Between she and Oliver Willis, they're quite hard workers there at the American Independent. The Trump administration is forcing job candidates for political appointments to praise Trump in their applications with one question on a new questionnaire, asking what part of his campaign message most appealed to them and why. The news that job applicants must demonstrate loyalty to Trump and his message comes as the Trump administration is working to purge staffers deemed not sufficiently loyal. Already, Trump has ousted officials including Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, former U.S. Ambassador to the EU Gordon Sondland, and top Pentagon policy official John Rood, who questioned his scheme to withhold military aid to Ukraine in order to push the country to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden. The Associated Press reported that Trump's purge is still ongoing, as Trump on Tuesday yesterday withdrew the nomination of a Pentagon official who questioned his military aid freeze to the Ukraine because Trump was violating the Logan Act. He is not above the law, even though Bill Barr has an OLC memo that says he can. The OLC is not the Supreme Court. I know John Roberts bowls and strikes. John Roberts never calls a foul ball on the home team. But we do have some dissenting opinions on the court now, don't we? CNN reported that the new question asking job applicants to praise Trump was the brainchild of White House staffer John McEntee. McEntee was originally fired from his job as Trump's personal assistant in March of 2018 and marched off the White House grounds after he was unable to pass a background check, thanks in part to an online gambling habit. But Trump brought McEntee back in February to be the head of the White House Personnel Department, where he's helped root out allegedly disloyal staffers. Since his return, McEntee hired James Bacon, a 23-year-old college senior from George Washington U, to be one of his top aides in the Presidential Personnel Office, helping carry out the loyalty demand of staff. Bacon's grandmother assured Business Insider that he is fit for the role despite his age. James is interested in the protocol process. He just by chance got into politics, she said. He's not some dumb kid who Trump put in there. Yeah, he's a brown shirt, isn't he? The Trump youngin'. Out there to do dear leader's bidding. Thank you very much, Grandma. Okay, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Beethoven is a giant of classical music, and the most influential, too. At least when it comes to piano compositions. That's according to a study in the journal EPJ Data Science. If you're wondering how data analysis could determine something as intangible as cultural influence, it's worth remembering this.
The great thing about music is that it is the most mathematical of the art forms we actually can deal with, because a lot of it is symbolic, it's temporal, so we have like symbols. The music is derived using symbols that are connected in time.
Ju-Young Park is a theoretical physicist by training and associate professor of culture technology at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. Park and his colleagues collected 900 piano compositions by 19 composers, spanning the Baroque, Classical, and Romantic periods, from 1700 to 1910. Then they used that mathematical quality to their advantage by dividing each composition into what they called code words, a group of simultaneously played notes, in other words, a chord. They then compared each chord to the chord or note that came after it, which allowed them to determine how creative composers were at coming up with novel transitions. The composer who won top marks for novelty, Rachmaninoff. But when the researchers looked at those chord transitions across all 19 composers, it was Beethoven who was the most heavily borrowed from, meaning at least among the composers in this analysis, his influence loomed the largest. Their study does come with a couple caveats. Again, the researchers only considered piano compositions in this work, not orchestral works. And by only studying chord transitions, their conclusions wouldn't capture artists who were influential in other ways.
It's well understood. I found out that Mozart's contribution to evolution of music comes from the musical forms that he devised, and that was not very well captured by our mathematical modeling.
As for Park, the results convinced him he has some listening to do.
Of course, I do like Rachmaninoff's music, but I have to confess that I have listened to Beethoven way more than Rachmaninoff. So after this work came out, I ended up buying like this whole complete Rachmaninoff collection from Amazon and waiting for this collection to arrive.
Seems that Park turned a minor interest into a major commitment, in a key way. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1914. That was the day that President Woodrow Wilson signed the Seamen's Act into law. The act was in part a response to the tragic sinking of the Titanic. The International Seamen's Union was demanding changes to the working conditions at sea. The job of a seaman required long times away from home and tough physical labor. The workers had few rights. The union found a friend in Senator Robert La Follette of Wisconsin. He championed a new law that set guidelines for basic safety and decent working conditions for those who sailed under the American flag. The act set the work week at a maximum of 56 hours. It established holidays for non-essential crew. The law also improved working conditions by setting standards for cleanliness and safety on board. It abolished the practice of jailing seamen that tried to desert the ship. It required that seamen be paid half of their wages during the voyage. The practice had been to withhold wages to ensure the workers did not desert the ships at port. The new law also required that 16 square feet of space be given to each worker for sleeping. It also mandated that ships should have adequate lifeboats. These last two provisions angered the ship owners because it meant there would be less space on board for cargo. Finally, the law gave seamen the right to organize into unions. Senator La Follette described the negative reaction of the owners to his law by observing, "Already the masters of the seas are beginning to threaten dire vengeance." The act was a major victory for the rights of labor on the high seas. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The morning after Super Tuesday, everything is different. Thanks to an emotional endorsement by Congressman Jim Clyburn, Joe Biden's win in South Carolina on Saturday was the snowball that became a virtual avalanche. The so-called moderates in the race dropped out, throwing their support to the former vice president, helping to propel him to a stunning Super Tuesday victory. Biden won the races you'd expect, the southern states that the Democrats haven't taken in a general election in more than a generation. But Amy Klobuchar's endorsement likely fueled his surprise victory in Minnesota, a state Bernie Sanders won easily in 2016. And Beto O'Rourke's endorsement likely played a role in Biden's shocking victory in Texas, where Sanders had been polling way ahead. And in one of the biggest upsets of the night, Biden won in Elizabeth Warren's home state of Massachusetts, with Bernie Sanders placing second and Warren coming in third. Sanders, meanwhile, while underperforming expectations, won California, Colorado, Utah, and his home state of Vermont. The total number of delegates awarded may not be known for days or even weeks, but California's 415 pledged delegates could make a difference in the standings. Elizabeth Warren did not fare well. She didn't win in a single state and garnered only 28 delegates. But as of press time is showing no signs of dropping out. Warren spent Tuesday night campaigning in Michigan. The biggest loser, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who spent about $500 million on his quest to purchase the nomination. He notched one victory in the U.S. territory of American Samoa. Calculations show that Michael Bloomberg spent $46.5 million per delegate and is reportedly considering dropping out as soon as Wednesday. Of course, Elizabeth Warren is also facing intense pressure to step aside. Next Tuesday, March 10th, votes will be cast in Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, and North Dakota. The following week, it's Florida, Arizona, Illinois, and Ohio. Major voting problems were apparent in the two biggest states voting Tuesday, California and Texas. Although the polls closed at 8 p.m. local time, voters stayed in line for hours until every vote was cast. I do wonder how many just gave up and went home. On Wednesday's Nicole Sandler Show, I'll speak with Brad Friedman of BradBlog.com and the Bradcast about the huge problems with the new voting machines in both California and Texas. One important factoid. In every state with exit polls, results show majority support for replacing private insurance. In other races of note, it appears that incumbent Henry Cuellar, Blue Dog of Texas, is successfully defending his seat against progressive Jessica Cisneros. With 44% of the vote counted, Cuellar leads 53 to 48%. In California's 25th district, a seat vacated by Katie Hill, the DCCC handpicked candidate Christy Smith has easily defeated her Democratic opponents, including Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. Tennessee is under a state of emergency after its deadliest tornado day in 7 years. At least 25 people were killed and dozens more are unaccounted for after storms ripped through the Nashville area. Thousands are still without power, and search and rescue teams are working to locate the missing. The destruction and confusion following the storms led some polling places in the state and surrounding areas to extend their hours to accommodate Super Tuesday voters. Meanwhile, economic fears over the coronavirus epidemic continue to rise. The Federal Reserve slashed interest rates by 0.5 percentage point on Tuesday in an attempt to give the U.S. economy a jolt. But it didn't work. Just moments after the Fed announced the rate cut, the markets began another slide that ended at the closing bell with an 800-point or 2.9% drop. Meanwhile, the coronavirus COVID-19 continues its march toward world domination. Globally, it's killed over 300 people and infected over 93,000 in close to 80 countries. The U.S. has reported 127 confirmed cases in 16 states. Then again, only around 500 tests have been administered here, as opposed to tens of thousands in other countries. Mike Pence announced a policy change on Tuesday, removing restrictions to getting tested. Now we just need the tests. So about that peace deal with the Taliban, the U.S. has conducted an airstrike against Taliban fighters in Afghanistan as the just-announced deal between the two countries threatens to fray just days after it was signed. The breakdown began after reports the Taliban had resumed violence in the country, carrying out 33 reported attacks that killed 6 civilians and wounded 14 others. Such aggression is expressly forbidden by the deal with the U.S. in exchange for the U.S. reducing its troop presence in the country. Donald Trump and Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, the Taliban's chief negotiator, spoke by phone Tuesday amid the reports, a conversation that Trump described as good.
I spoke to the leader of the Taliban today. We had a good conversation. We've agreed there's no violence. We don't want violence. We'll see what happens. They're dealing with Afghanistan, but we'll see what happens.
Hours later, military officials announced the airstrike, which they said was a defensive move to protect a U.S. military checkpoint. And from the Elections Have Consequences file, on Wednesday, the Supreme Court is hearing oral arguments in the first major abortion case of the Trump era. The case centers on a restrictive Louisiana law requiring abortion providers to have admitting privileges at nearby hospitals, a measure opponents say is medically unnecessary and will result in the closure of all but one clinic in the state. And finally, Donald Trump made good on his promise to sue the media. Of course, he filed suit against the New York Times last week over an opinion column. This time, the target is the Washington Post. Trump's latest lawsuit takes aim at opinion articles from last year that linked the president to Russian election interference. In the first, Greg Sargent, who writes the Plumline blog, said Trump had, quote, tried to conspire with a sweeping and systematic attack by Russia in 2016. In the second, Paul Waldman, who also contributes to the Plumline blog, questioned whether Russia and North Korea would help Trump get elected this year. I got good news. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, because there's lots more of America where we come from. It is currently 32 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy. We're going to have nearly the same forecast as yesterday, which will be highs in the mid-60s, winds light and variable, overnight lows in the mid to low 30s, winds light and variable. And, partly cloudy conditions and then generally sunny tomorrow, despite a few afternoon clouds. Highs will be in the mid to upper 60s, and the winds will pick up out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Pollen is rated at none. Air quality index is good at 21 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at 4. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.26 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 44 and cloudy. Paris is 46 with heavy rain. Rome is 59 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 51 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 43 with a light rain shower. Hong Kong is 61 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 47 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 73 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 and partly cloudy. And New York is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Japan is preparing to host the Tokyo Summer Olympics as planned, the government's top spokesman said, amid speculation the games could be postponed because of COVID-19. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshida Suga made the comment at a regular news conference. Olympic Minister Seiko Hashimoto had said that Tokyo's contract with the International Olympic Committee could be interpreted as allowing a postponement until the end of the year, although she reiterated that the government remained committed to the games starting on July 24th.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anna Isabel Martinez of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Activist Arusi Unda knew many across Mexico shared her fury over violence against women and impunity for the perpetrators, but she was still surprised when her vision of women staging a national one-day strike took off beyond her home state. In many towns and cities, women next Monday, which would be this coming Monday, will skip school, work, and other activities to show how public life looks without them, delivering a critique of the violence that has led to a surge in femicides or gender-motivated killings of women. It's like a Cinderella story, Unda told Reuters, marveling at how her obscure 15-member feminist collective, Brujas del Mar, the Witches of the Sea, had suddenly been thrust into the national spotlight by the protest it helped inspire. This is like the Lost Village, the tiny collective, the nobody women. But sooner or later it was going to happen, said Unda, whose group in the eastern state of Veracruz lives off its own funds, plus sales of bandanas and keychains. Femicides in Mexico jumped 137% in the past 5 years as gang violence pushed the national murder tally to record heights. Most violent crimes go unsolved. Women in Mexico are fed up, said Unda, age 32, the spokeswoman for Brujas del Mar, which became known in Mexico last year for its advocacy of abortion rights. It's not just the obvious crisis of femicides in Mexico, but also what happens every day at home, at school, at work. There is no place that is safe for us. Support for next Monday's protest, one day after International Women's Day, has cut across a swath of society, from companies and universities right up to government ministries. President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador has said government employees are free to join the walkout, but he also accused political opponents of seeking to exploit the country's security problems to undermine his administration. Unda dismissed his comments as a macho and condescending attitude toward the organizers. So, we're stupid? Or what, she said. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Nevertheless, she persisted. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. In fact, we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya. A little bit of spice in our lives. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.